Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Mr. Middle Path, and today's video is going to be about the past. But first I want to say Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. I know this video took a while to get out. I'll discuss that in another video inshallah on my vlog. But for this video, we talked last time about red flags in marriage, and the last red flag that I went over was the past. So this time we're going to go exclusively into the past. And the two questions that people basically ask is, should I tell my spouse or fiance about my past, or should I accept the past of my spouse and fiance? So if you're here, those are the questions we're going to answer. And I want to give a disclaimer, don't take advice from me online. Every person's specific situation is different, so go ask a scholar, go ask a person of knowledge, go ask a person that you trust for advice for your specific situation. Don't just take it from me. I'm only talking about general advices and general principles. The other thing is, I'm not going to be breaking this down from an Islamic point of view, just because I'm not a scholar. Again, and every situation is different. For when you need that scholarly advice, you need to go to a scholar and ask, this is my situation, what should I do? I'm only talking about general principles. And the general default position in Islam is you do not share your sins with other people. However, there are exceptions to that rule. We have hadith where people would go up to the Prophet and said, I did such and such thing, what should I do for my kafara, what should I do for tawbah? And we also have tawbah stories, and that's not to say that we're going to use that to prove or say that you should tell your partner about your past. That's not what I'm saying at all. For your specific situation, you should talk to a sheikh. We do have hadith about, one very well-known hadith is that Allah does not forgive the mujahid. The mujahid is someone who openly commits sins, or they do a sin and they talk about the sin that they committed, right? And that's usually in the case of bragging, generally is how it's understood. So let's get into it, and let's start with a story. I did a lot of psychological counseling for people in the past and therapy for people, and I still do to a certain extent, although not as much as before. And one story that I want to share with you all is that there was a person who, before they got married, they had ended up having sex with a sibling of theirs when they were young. And this type of thing weighed down on them, ate at them, and made them very guilty, and it messed them up. And they felt they needed to talk to someone about that, and they talked to their spouse-to-be. And the spouse-to-be was very understanding. You know, it's cool, it happened a long time ago, it doesn't reflect who you are as a person, everybody goes through fitna, it's okay, I love you for who you are, and they got married, and they're still married till this day. SubhanAllah. And that's a pretty dark story, and these stories, when we do counseling and all, it can get pretty dark. Another story is someone who got married, and the girl hid her past, and it turned out he found out about the past on his own through research, and it was a little bit too much for him to handle. It was too much of a shock, and he just kind of left her. And there were also other things. It seemed that that girl still hadn't gotten over her past, so that was also a red flag for him. And after consulting the people that he thought were wise, he was like, yo, I'm out. Thank you, have a nice life. So we learn two things from these stories. But let's answer the question first before we go back to the stories. Should I tell my spouse or fiance about my past? Well, that goes to two questions. Is the past in the past, or does the past still affect you? If the past is in the past, and it's long ago, and there's no point in sharing it because you're over it, it's between you and Allah, you're over it. You don't need to share it. There's no point. You don't want to, and you're not obligated to. And does the past still affect me? Is the past still a part of your life? Is the past still hurting you? Is the past still haunting you? And to give you an example of this, one psychiatrist that I knew when I was in Egypt, he was telling me that a lot of patients that he had were grown, adult, married men who had a problem with masturbation and pornography. And they were doing it before they got married, and they thought that after they got married, they would no longer be doing it. And unfortunately for them, that was not the case. That wasn't true. They continued into this addiction, and they were not able to get past it. So a little bit of transparency goes a long way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about spouses that they're a cover for you and you're a cover for them. They cover your faults, you cover their sins, you cover their mistakes, you try to help each other become better. So if you have a past that's affecting you, that's haunting you, then yes, you should absolutely share only that which needs to be shared. Don't go into the details of everything that you've ever done, but you should share what needs to be shared in order for you to get the help that you need so that you don't suffer alone. What's better? In the case of those guys that were still masturbating to pornography, that they tell their spouse to be about it before they get married, and they're like, look, I have this problem, I'm trying to get over it, I'm just letting you know these are, I need your help, and after we get married, you need to help me with this. Or that a year into the marriage or months into the marriage, the girl walks in on the guy and he's on his computer, oh, it's not what it looks like, and which one is better? You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you could hurt the marriage and damage it. A little bit of transparency goes a long way. And most of the time when people are thinking of a past, they're thinking of a sexual past. That is not what I'm talking about. I don't necessarily mean a sexual past. I mean anything that could make someone uncomfortable. But if it is a sexual past, and let's say something is in the past and it's a long time ago and you're over it, but it has to do with virginity, technically speaking, you don't need, not everybody bleeds when it's time for the first time for intercourse. And I'm going to be making a whole separate video on virginity and all of that, because that's its own topic. It requires its own separate elucidation for that specific topic. But in general, if something is still affecting you, it should be shared. For example, I know a story of a guy who he had a girlfriend in the past, and that girlfriend still messages him trying to get back with him, and he's married, he's been long married, but he told his wife about that, and she knew about that, and he was like, look, I don't know why, but this person still messages me. And he even tried to have his wife to talk to that girl to back off, like when she kept calling on the phone, he's like, yo, can you just answer this and tell her that, like, yo, I'm married now, and tell her to leave me alone. That's much better, right? The wife is involved, she knows, she's like, okay, whatever, it's in the past, halas, That's much better than if he was to hide that from us, like, no, it's in the past, I'm not gonna share my sins with other people. And then the girl's messaging him or sending him texts, and he has no intention of answering it. He has no intention of responding to it. He's way past it. But the wife is seeing it, and she's like, yo, what the hell's going on? So again, a little bit of transparency goes a long way. If the past is still affecting you in a way that it's going to affect your marriage, or that you need help from your spouse to overcome the emotional distress that you're going through, the psychological distress that you're going through, then yes, you should share it. And of course, if you're past it and it's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you have gotten over it, then you've gotten over it, and perhaps it's best that you not share something with your spouse that could potentially hurt them and it wouldn't be a cause of help. Now let's go to the next question. Your spouse is telling you, or your spouse-to-be is telling you about their past, and we live in a time of fitna. So everybody has a past. A lot of practicing people have been through some things. And I'm not talking about little sins, I'm talking about major sins. Most people that are practicing have been through some type of major sins, and it's a bit naive to assume that everyone you see, just because they're very religious, hasn't been through anything. It's going to be probably something that you don't like, and that's just the nature of this day and age. Either you did it or someone else did it, or it's just the nature of this day and age, because we live in a time of fitness, subhanAllah. May Allah protect us. Should I accept the past and this of my spouse and fiance? Well, just like here, does the past still affect you? You're asking kind of the same question, but in reverse. Are you able to give emotional and psychological support when they come to you and ask, oh, by the way, if someone starts talking about their past and there's no need, and they're just opening up to you about everything that they've ever did, and you barely know them and you haven't even had a time to develop that trust yet, that in and of itself is a red flag that you should be very careful of. But let's say that the person trusts you, you're about to get married, or you're married, or you're going through the steps, and trust has been developed, and they open up to you, and they need your help and support. Are you able to give emotional and psychological support? Or are you asking too many questions? Oh, what about this? What about that? Oh, where'd you go? Where'd you come from? Who were you talking to? Are you asking too many questions? Are you starting to be insulting? How could you have done that thing so long ago? What's wrong with you? Who would have done that? Why would you do something like that? Or are you becoming too suspicious? Kind of related. They're all related, right? Naturally, when someone has a past, it's kind of still going to affect them, right? Everyone has guilty feelings. Unless you're a psychopath, you're going to feel guilty. Everyone, when someone tells them about the past, they're going to have a reaction like, oh my God, what about this, what about that, right? But that's not what we're talking about. Everyone's going to have this natural reaction. What I'm talking about is this overwhelming? Is this so overwhelming, is so consuming that you're unable to give any emotional, psychological support that the person needs? Well then, that answers your question. You should not accept the past of your spouse or your partner. Not necessarily because of them, but because of you. And this is important, because someone might not need to ask themselves these questions. They have hard lines. They have hard red lines. They're like, yo, if this person did this, I'm out. But the nature of love is that love can change how we feel about someone. For example, a girl who's been a virgin her whole life, who grew up in a very conservative Muslim family, she's like, yo, I only want someone from my culture because that's what she's used to, that's what she likes. So I want someone from my culture and I want someone who's a virgin. And subhanAllah, she ends up marrying a convert guy who had a lot of sexual intercourse before he got married. So keep that, that's an interesting, that happens a lot, you know. So when love comes in the picture, sometimes we change our minds. And that's why these questions are important, because it's not about love. You can love someone, but you're not able to give them emotional, psychological support. You can love someone, but this is just eating you up. So you love someone and you're doubting, like, do I keep the marriage or I not keep the marriage? Well, if this is eating you up and it's too much for you, then don't accept the spouse. Don't accept the past of your spouse or fiance. If you're trying to forgive or you're trying to go over and you can't, and you've tried really hard, then it's best to move on at that point so you don't hurt the marriage. And you don't hurt yourself later on in the future and end up in a divorce like, yo, I thought I could handle this, but I can't, and I need to end this relationship. Well, now you got married and it's been a few years in the marriage. Now you want to say that? So ask yourself these questions before you enter into a relationship. Ask yourself these questions before you're about to open up to someone about whether they should accept you or not. And it's natural to want to open up about these things, but we need to be very careful. So again, you know, consult with people that you know personally that you need help if you need help. Don't take this as a specific advice for you. This is a general advice talking about general principles. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Take care. Peace out. Assalamu alaikum.